All right. Hello, everyone. This is Ask Angie, Angela Calloway from Edmonds Law Office. And today we have a very special guest with us, Chitra Patel. She is an amazing financial advisor. And we are going to talk about all things for medical startups and medical practice owners today. So, Chitra, thank you so much for being here today. I'll let you take the floor and just introduce yourself and tell the viewers a little bit about yourself.
All right, great. Well, before I introduce myself, just a disclosure to read. So advisory services offered through New Edge Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor. WealthWorth and its representatives do not provide tax or legal advice. Therefore, it is important to coordinate with your tax or legal advisor regarding your specific situation. So now that we have that out of the way, my name is Chitra Patel. I'm a CFP and CPWA. I am the CEO of WealthWorth, and we help medical professionals grow what we like to call their wealth worth, which is the financial foundation that they need to thrive personally, support their families, and give back to their communities. And whether you already own a thriving practice or planning to launch one, I'm really excited about today's conversation with Angie.
Thank you so much for being here. As she said, this is just for informational purposes. As you all know, watching this video does not create an attorney-client relationship with me or my practice, and you are encouraged to seek legal advice and financial advice from your own financial advisors and attorneys. All right, so before we get into our questions for today, I'd love for you to just talk about a little bit about why you got into financial advising. What drew you to this profession?
Well, it really started at a young age. I would always kind of watch my parents, balance their credit card statements. And we talked a lot about, good choices with money. And so it always piqued my interest. And then my dad was really interested in the stock market. So I always had visibility and connection with that. And when I was in high school, I actually dreamed about, being on Wall Street and working with it and being involved with the stock market. So it all came to fruition after college. I started my career at an insurance firm and then kind of had many different experiences in the industry with banking and wealth management, and now have my own wealth management practice.
Awesome. So Chitra and I, we've hung out a couple times and spoken, but one thing I don't know if we've talked about before is the fact that one thing that I really like about your brand is that you kind of give me the energy of not a traditional financial advisor. And so I've had conversations and I've also worked with financial advisors in the past. And one of the things that I find, and even some of my other lawyer colleagues complain about, is like they don't understand what are we paying for, right? You feel like, you're paying this fee, but you're not really getting like personal advice that you couldn't find on Google, right? You just feel like you're just kind of a number, you meet with them once a year and you pay all this money and you're like, okay, well, what's my ROI, right? So I'd love to hear a little bit about, I know you've worked in corporate, like how that framed a little bit of your perspective or your branding or how you approach your clients differently from what I've experienced. And I know a lot of my colleagues have experienced and complained about of like, I just feel like this isn't really a good use of my time or money.
Oh, that's a great question. Well, a big part of it is being able to customize the experience. When you work at big firms, which I have in the past, as you referenced, it's really, you have to kind of give your service and your expertise in a box. And I really love that being independent, having my own firm, I'm able to really customize the experience. And that comes down to really getting to know the client and their goals and objectives, their family, their business. And so I get to know way more than the numbers about with my clients, and that helps me help them make better choices on the numbers. And so I think it all comes down to personal, deep relationships. A lot of, the high level financial stuff, to your point, you can Google and get the answers you need, but for someone to really understand your situation and what is important to you and how you want that to translate to your plan is what I love to do in my practice.
Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, let's get into some specific questions for your clients, my clients, things that are top of mind for them. So let's talk about startups first. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think in this day and age, it's realistic to launch a cash pay practice in Georgia without going broke in the first year?
So that's a very interesting question. I think yes, if you're strategic. What I think it boils down to is success comes from identifying a niche and setting realistic income expectations and building a lean cost structure initially. And so, partnering and collaborating with attorneys like you and CPAs and other business advisors, we can all guide clients to through their patient education strategies, or, if they're going to do initial marketing investments and setting up payment systems. So having a model on how that will be structured is really important on the front end. And we at WealthWorth also like to model how long personal reserves need to last until the practice becomes cash flow positive.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned like planning and having a niche. Like those two things I find, particularly when I'm speaking to people who are like, I want to start a concierge practice or I want to do DPC. And it's kind of like a reaction from burnout. Maybe they're just tired of being in the big medical system, and it's not as much planning going into it as far as, okay, how much money is it going to take to actually launch?
Absolutely.
And how long am I going to have to float these like overhead costs and all of those things? And I find that sometimes clients kind of focus on having some of the appearances of a fancy office. They get kind of one of the more expensive medical offices to rent,
Yeah.
and they want to hire a full-time RN immediately and an MA. And I'm like, you probably don't need to take on all of those costs like right when you first start.
Absolutely. Don't try to boil the ocean, right? I mean, take it strategically. 100% agree.
Yeah. So what financial red flags do you look for in a potential business partner before someone signs a partnership agreement, or if you're working with clients that want to work together or open a medical practice together? What are some of the things that you think they should think through before kind of moving forward with that?
Great question. So from a red flag perspective, I would say the key ones are if they don't have any personal financial disclosures, be aware. Also, if there's mismatched credit scores or debt loads, that's something to be aware of as well. Are there any disagreements about money philosophy or exit goals? It's really important that, they're on the same page at the beginning. And, if there's no legal partnership agreement, that would be a huge red flag. So I think your guidance in particular on this question is really important in making sure, people enter in the right partnership agreement. And that's what we do. We connect our clients to advisors like you and others that can help run financial due diligence, set up fair buy-in structures, and then also create exit terms that reduce future conflict.
Right. I find like sometimes people want to do business together, but then they feel uncomfortable having this conversation. Yes. Right. Sometimes when we're talking about a partnership agreement or corporate bylaws, if they're going to do a corporate structure, I'm like, okay, have you guys talked about, like you said, like debt loads, or like, what is your mentality about risk? That's one of the things I always bring up, because, people have different preferences, and they're like, oh, well, I don't know. Oh, I haven't asked them what their credit is or what their debt is, and I'm like, okay, but you're wanting to sign and go into this huge venture, right? And commit yourself to however many years this business is going to be existing, and you guys don't feel comfortable talking about money?
Yeah. You have to be comfortable talking about money, and it needs to be from the start. That is why in marriages there's prenuptial agreements and counseling before they enter the marriage, because you do not want to have that conversation later on down the road. Have it up front.
Yeah. I always tell people, I mean, it's uncomfortable, but once you get it out the way, at least you guys are on the same page. Everyone is protected. Because on the other side, doing a business divorce, as I like to call them, like a dissolution, those can be just as like high strung and very emotional as a marriage divorce, right?
Absolutely.
And people are, so anyways, okay, so let's do one more question on startups, and then we'll transition to current
Right.
and thriving medical practices. So if a new practice owner has $25,000 to spend, what are the top considerations to allocate those funds between legal, financial, and marketing needs?
Oh, that's a great question. So I would say, first and foremost, legal and compliance, to allocate anywhere from 30 to 40%. And that cost would cover things like entity formation, contracts, liability coverage. You would be the one to guide them through that topic. Financial setup is also very important, and I would allocate 20 to 25% of that spend on that piece. So that would entail bookkeeping, tax planning, and having advisor support. And then from a marketing and branding perspective, I would also allocate, just along the lines of legal and compliance, 30 to 40%. So that's the website, SEO, content, launch events. I mean, marketing, especially in the beginning, is huge to help gain that traction and visibility to bring in those patients. And so, and then beyond that, most importantly, preserve at least 10% for working capital flexibility. So every dollar that you spend, should support your long-term viability and brand positioning, and set that doctor and medical practice up for success.
Yeah, I love that you talked about marketing specifically, because I see that a lot of startups don't think about spending money on that. Sometimes they're considering a website, they'll have someone build that, but beyond that, they're like, people want to work with me. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not exactly a marketing plan or strategy. And of course, that's not my area of expertise, but you have to have a way to get patients.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so interesting. I have seen a lot of doctors and medical practices now on Instagram, and they're doing, educational content, but also fun content to really get the patients to get to know them, so that they feel comfortable in working with that practice.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a totally different era, I think, with, social media, and now we have AI and all of those things, but you have to do something to differentiate yourself. And I think kind of going into it, a lot of doctors don't understand like the marketing machine, like the funnel, and like getting people and the whole conversion process, particularly if you have a concierge practice, because now you're competing with insurance-based practices, and you have to show that value to that prospective patient, that I'm willing to pay a monthly subscription fee to work with you.
Absolutely.
So
yes,
it's not as intuitive as I feel like some physicians think. They're like, oh, I'm going to open my door and I'm going to have a patient waiting list.
That's right. You have to work for it. There's so much competition everywhere, and honestly, when people do hear your name, they Google it, right? Even for doctors. So it's so important to be aware of what's there also when you put your name into Google or any search engine.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay, let's transition and talk about current medical practice owners. These are typically people that have been operating for at least 2 years. They may be looking to expand, hire more staff. And so let's talk about a few things that might pertain to them specifically. Okay, so what's one financial blind spot most established practice owners overlook until it becomes a serious liability?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. So I have seen many owners underestimate how critical they are to the practice operations, and they don't have adequate protections in place if something happens to them. So What that includes is underinsured disability coverage, lack of business continuity plans, and no buy-sell agreement with their partners. So what we encourage our clients to do is go through what if you couldn't work for 90 days exercise, and build protections like proper insurance, access to funds, contingency planning, and clearly define roles in their absence, because they don't want their practice to stop if they have to stop.
Right. That is so important. I know I've experienced that on my side where, you have a sole physician and then some support staff, right? You have the nurse or the MA or the office manager. But then, like you said, if the physician gets sick or they're not able to practice or they have to get medical treatment themselves, right? For a diagnosis, it's like now the practice is in chaos because you don't have any backup plans in place. So that's a really important one, the underinsurance for, short-term or long-term disability.
That's right.
Okay, so is it better to reinvest in the business or max out retirement accounts? And how do physician owners find the right balance?
Well, I love that question, being a financial advisor. And what I'd have to say to that is there's no one size fits all answer. Reinvestment into the practice may lead to higher earnings long term, while maxing out the retirement plan helps build personal wealth and reduces taxes in the short term. So we like to look at it and in each client scenario and help clients strike the right balance between modeling the ROI of business investment versus the compounding power of their retirement accounts, like a solo 401k or cash balance plan. And you really need a plan that supports both growth for the business as well as personal financial freedom.
Awesome. Okay, last question for established practice owners. How do you help practice owners set personal salary goals versus business reinvestment, especially when guilt or uncertainty creeps in?
Well, we start by advising them to separate their roles. So they're an owner, they're a practitioner, and they're an employee. And as a practitioner, you should be paid fair market compensation, just like any other doctor working at a big practice would be paid. And then as an owner, you can decide how to reinvest those profits. So we like to collaborate with the doctor's CPAs to create structured distributions and profit sharing schedules. So the pay isn't emotional, it's very strategic. This builds long-term sustainability and lets them show up for patients without financial guilt in the background, which is very important.
Yeah, I see that sometimes with physician owners who may not be making enough revenue to pay themselves fair market. And so, they're juggling the overhead and they're trying to figure those things out. So I see that becomes a financial stress, right?
Yeah, and it's good to reevaluate it, and especially in the beginning, looking at it even on a quarterly basis. It's important to have a good pulse on that and adjust accordingly as the growth happens.
Right. Absolutely. Looking at it every 3 months is a great tip. And I always tell my clients, don't sign these long leases, 7 years, 8 years. There's so much that can happen even in your first 12 months. Maybe you'll do this practice. Maybe you'll change your niche. Maybe you'll decide you'll partner with someone else. It's too long of a commitment.
100%.
To agree. But a lot of times, people will push for those longer leases for medical spaces. So
that's so true. Yeah. Good advice on your part.
Yeah. So I want to give you an opportunity to kind of give your last pitch and contact information to people that might want to work with you and get some of your amazing financial advising services.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Well, what I'd say is, owning a medical practice, whether you already do or plan to, is both a business decision and a personal journey. And at WealthWorth, we help you make that journey with clarity, intention, and impact. And we'd love to be a financial partner for you who understands how to grow your business and your personal wealth worth, which is what we like to call it. And so the ways that you can connect with us through our website, www.yourwealthworth.com. And we also have an Instagram page, WealthWorth, LinkedIn, Facebook. You can contact us in all those different ways. We just launched a YouTube channel as well. So would love to connect and be a resource. And we will also include all of that in the show notes.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for being here on this week's version of Ask Angie, where we talked with Chitra Patel about all different types of things that aspiring and current established medical practice owners should consider. Until next time, thanks, guys.
Thank you.